I'm Matt Wilhelmy. I'm the owner of Strategic Voyages Business Consultants. I'm also the author of Taboo Business Questions, What's Haunting Every Entrepreneur's Growth. And today I'm joined by Jill Simons. Jill is the founder and CEO of Savvy Strategic Partners, a full-service fractional C-suite serving business owners with an experienced collective of outsourced executive leadership services across the functions of operations, revenue, and finance. She's a self-proclaimed corporate dropout. After 10 years in the marketing space, she's found her passion supporting B2B organizations as a fractional COO and EOS integrator. She has a master's degree in organizational leadership and finds her greatest fulfillment and success in helping others realize their full potential, both personally and in business. Jill, thank you so much for taking some time with me today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So this is our third episode together. And in our third episode, we get to talk about some solutions to the problems that we kind of identified in episode 1. And so if anybody wants to kind of go back and get the full breakdown, I really encourage them to go back and watch episode 1. But just to summarize, here in episode 3, you and I were talking about this family-ran B2B organization that has multiple locations, and you were very direct and got into some of their issues, because what they really, the issues that they had were kind of surrounding, issues with their desire to grow, but really an inability to grow because there was a lack of accountability, structure, and there was kind of some confusion on kind of who's leading and who's managing the teams. And so, you have obviously seen these issues before. In our first episode, we went through your background. So if somebody wants to kind of know, a little bit more about you and your expertise, they should certainly go back and watch that. But to kind of skip ahead here and get right into the meat and the potatoes, we've got some solutions that I'm sure that you've recommended once or twice. You've seen these issues before. And so how would you go about helping this company? What would be maybe the first thing that you would try to do and implement to really kind of guide them forward and solve some of these issues?
Absolutely. So at the root of a lot of these issues we talked about, again, comes down to people. We have communication, accountability, lack of that structure, clarity in roles, clarity in that accountability, and who owns what. Solution 1, I would want to drill in deeper, is organizational structure and clearly defining those roles by way of an accountability chart or, chart of sorts that clearly outlines those roles and responsibilities within the entire team.
And so when you're talking about implementing something like that, in this particular organization, they do have a relatively flat org chart. There were about 12 crews. They serve the restaurant industry. And so each crew, they have about 5 people on a crew. And so the org chart, if you can kind of imagine it, it's pretty flat. But how would you implement something like that?
Yeah, really, it's a lot of diving deeper, again, questioning and discussing as a team, where are their gaps? Where are there gaps either that within the process of how we service the industry we do or the business that we do that are falling through the cracks? Is there confusion? What's not getting done, right? A lot of kind of pinpointing and identifying at the symptom level where some of these inefficiencies and lack of clarity are happening, to help us define then, okay, the structure itself of the organization may not be wrong. It may be right in terms of the size, the flat, whether it's flat or whether we have a deeper level of management. All of those things comes down to that identifying the alignment of that accountability with where the business is going. Okay, this is the structure of the team now, how things are happening, the resources we have and capacity to push this plan forward, to execute on the business plan, to do good business. What are the growth objectives? What are our goals for growth? What are we going to need in human capital and resources and align accountabilities to grow into that? So it's a matter of looking at current state as well as future state. So we're really looking at a 30,000 foot view and going deeper with what does that look like right now, where we may have the accountability structure outlined, we have kind of the team and the outputs of what each of those individuals do, but are those the right roles, first of all? Or do we have the right seats? Have we identified the roles and responsibilities across the organization that are needed with absent, right? Without really the bias of who's kind of sitting there now. Let's start first with that structure that the business needs. And then future state. What is, if we need this much human capital and resources of people and capacity in people in the team, and we're growing the size of the team, how does that, what sort of structure in management and leadership within the team are we going to need to start building in and enforcing and reinforcing so that that can scale well, so that the seats are, we have the right number of leaders in place to also help own those core functions of the business and their teams within, and building more of that future state of the accountability chart too.
Yeah, when you start talking about future states, it brings me back to a class that I took as part of my master's program in industrial organizational psychology. And I'm not going to give a full lecture here, but the brief story is that, psychologist Tuckman created this team development model. And essentially there's these different stages. And so every team goes through these different stages. It's forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjoining. It's kind of a tongue twister there, but basically there's this system, there's a known function that all of these teams go through in order to be able to establish, in your words, that future state. And so you can't just like skip the work though. You have to go through these other steps in this process. And so what I heard you say when you're working with these organizations is oftentimes you would work with them to kind of forecast what do they want it to look like, that future state, and then meet them where they're at today and really kind of guide them to get there, right? That's a skill and a talent that not everybody has. But if you've kind of been there, done that, you're able to do that a lot more confidently because it's just, this is how it works. I've seen this and this is great. This is what this organization needs, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Love that. That framework is really helpful and in tandem with that. So I'll have to read more into that if you have the lecture or you have your notes.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think, a lot of what I love about industrial organizational psychology is that it just makes so much sense, especially with somebody with your background, a master's in organizational leadership. There's probably a lot of overlap, but, having, 15 plus years as a management consultant and going into organizations dozens and dozens of times, seeing things. Now that I've, taking these classes and really kind of understanding the why behind it and the psychology behind it, things just make a lot of sense. And so you can't just skip to the end and show people the last, few scenes of the movie and tell them, to figure it out. That's not going to work. They have to do the work to kind of get there. And so when I heard you talk about implementing, these types of structure within that organization, that's kind of what, in my mind, that's what it takes, to get there. But I'm curious if you had any other solutions that you would recommend for this organization.
Yeah, definitely. So we talked a little bit about scorecards in our previous episode as well. So with that accountability and structure and defining of roles, it can only go so far if we're not actually measuring the outcomes of that, right? And we don't have directly tied measurables and performance indicators for each role, each department, each function of the business and its health. So developing and tracking those, what we call KPIs, those key performing indicators, or OKRs, some might say, right? Like what are the most important key indicators and measurables to track? Without those, we're flying blind, and individuals in those seats and accountabilities may be kind of doing the work, but to what caliber and to what sort of results are we measuring?
Yeah, I think part of that exercise in developing those KPIs is really getting everybody in alignment and in agreement on what they are. It's not the owner coming in and saying it needs to be this and it needs to be this and figure it out and I'm out and mic drop. That's not how it works. It needs to be a collaborative process. And I often use the 3 C's of team building when I'm talking to businesses, because the first C is really having clarity of vision. The second one is commitment to excellence. It's really kind of that execution of it. And then the third one is just consistency. And so when you have those 3 C's, clarity, commitment, and consistency, you're able to really see those KPIs work. You're able to have a little bit more accountability and agency behind that. And it really just increases the effort all around for having those KPIs in place. That's great.
Absolutely. Yep, that's a big one.
So Jill, I think you had a third solution that you wanted to talk about with this organization, right?
Yes. We kind of touched on a little bit as well, but cadence and traction, communication within the teams, right? If we're not aligned and utilizing our time together the most effectively we can, then we can't drive the business forward. We don't have shared focus and collective alignment on what the most important initiatives are, tasks, to-dos, issues to solve for. So I think a lot of what we were hearing in case studies, the case study that we went through, as well as a lot of those cautionary tales, involved needing regular meeting cadence, structure in our communication. So getting cadence and implementing a regular meeting cadence for the team instantly is always really first number one. We work through a lot of these kind of bigger things if we're doing that. So that is a big one for sure, and getting that team aligned.
So I just want to clarify, because I know how this works. I've been through traction. I love traction. Yeah. I live and breathe it. But some people hear meetings and they immediately are like, I don't want another meeting. Don't want another meeting. And this is not supposed to be just one more meeting. This is honestly, in my mind, it's supposed to be like the meeting. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is where you're kind of showing the teacher your homework. But instead of a teacher, it's like group accountability. It's like, hey, this is the group therapy time. Like, did you do your work this week or not? And so it's actually probably going to eliminate some of the the other infrequent meetings or random pop-ins or impromptu meetings. I mean, it's supposed to really kind of clarify how that business works, right?
Absolutely. That's a really good point. Oftentimes the situation we're running into is it's almost as if I want to say, scrap all the meetings that are in your calendar. Let's just start from scratch, because truly, blow it up. Truly, that is ultimately what we kind of start to get to. The effectiveness of them is, the lacking, they hate them. There's several reasons. I mean, we could go into the details as to why we all hate meetings, and it's the type of meetings we're having, right? And it's the lack of productivity. It's the lack of actionable items. It's the complete lack of structure in them. And so scrap what we're going to do. If we do nothing else within our meeting time together, we're going to do this one meeting. It'll transform and change the way you think about meetings, the way we show up, the way we engage together as a team. Oftentimes, most of the businesses that I've worked with, our teams have worked in, are remotely based, right? We're on Zoom, we're on Teams, we're on Meets all the time. And that there's another added level and element of the fatigue from meetings, that the L10 structure and level 10 structure and sticking to that and consistency is a complete transformation for teams in the way they work. So oftentimes it is almost like, oh, well, we do this meeting now and this meeting's going so well. Do we need to also have, and it's like, what's coming out of that that's not going to be here, right? And all these kind of conversations, discussions that might be happening, or updates that could be an email, all of those sorts of things you hear, it's like, if it's not coming up as a prominent burning issue, something that someone truly needs solved to do their job well or to move us forward, why would we need to take the time in a room to all talk about it? So yeah, I mean, without, burning the place down, sometimes I'm like, just burn the meetings down and let's just start from a clean slate. Would be nice.
Yeah,
I don't enforce that, but.
Well, one of my favorite stories, Jill, that I tell people is about my first job in corporate America. And I won't say what the name of the company is. That's irrelevant. But I was a manager, and got a call from the district manager on my first day. And the district manager said, Matt, we're happy to have you on the team. Welcome aboard. Question, how many weekly meetings do you want to have? And I was like, well, I don't like 0. Like, what's the right answer here? As few as I need to have. And yeah. And what do you mean? And so what
Yeah.
I found out the district manager was trying to figure out is, if I was going to be on there twice daily conference calls, and that's a lot of conference calls.
Twice daily.
That's
Yeah.
just like way too many meetings. It's almost like an Office Space one where it's like meetings on top of meetings on top of meetings. And so this is not meant to be, like a super stack meeting where you're just like back to back all day. The L10 is pretty simple. It's 90 minutes. It's supposed to have a very distinct start time and end time, action items, all of that. But I'm curious, Jill, for organizations that you work with, what percentage of them already have traction going, and what percentage of them maybe have never heard of traction and you're kind of the first person to talk to them about it? What's that breakdown?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'd say half and half, because it's also, as a fractional COO, it's not an exclusivity and requirement and prerequisite for businesses that I serve and businesses that I work with. So while I bring the system and the tool to the organization, they may be, they've been humming along and 10 million plus in revenue and growing in size without an operating system at all yet. So I'd say it's maybe half and half, where those that are really seeking out the integrator role, they're committed to EOS, they are going to be implementing, versus those that have never heard of it, right? And it's just like, just whatever it is, get us going, get us into it. There's tools we can use, but also just bringing that level of expertise without that prerequisite of them knowing and committing to that specific system. So probably about half and half.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And the reason I asked is because, I found that there's a very different way that businesses operate depending on if they're kind of bought into the EOS system or not. And I don't mean to sound like, it's a Bible, but I've just seen it work. And it doesn't necessarily have to look like the same thing in every organization for it to be effective. Exactly. And I think that's one of the, maybe Traction doesn't like me saying that, but there's probably elements of the program that you implement and talk about in organizations that doesn't have to be like the full kit and caboodle. It could be, a little bit here and there, right? To kind of get them moving and what they need.
Absolutely. And I think that's, as experts in bringing that sort of structure and system to an organization, it requires so much adaptability and flexibility in us as executive leaders to know what's needed and when. When you're forcing something and forcing the learning, it's a lot for people to chew, especially outside of the executive leadership team. Like, it's a lot of information and words and terminology that at the end of it are, like could go or take or leave, right? That part of it isn't what is important, but that's where a lot of individuals get hung up and the team struggles, and it can become disruptive if we're really trying to force this thing forward full speed, because the team may be lean and there's light resources and I'm fractional and maybe my CFO is fractional, right? So the rate of speed has to be paced and balanced well with the needs of the team. So it might be, hey, the number one thing clearly is accountability this quarter. Right people, right seats. We've got to build out the team. We may focus strictly on maybe one tool that can really affect a lot of the issues that we're experiencing in these several areas, right? And it's not here's all the tools at 1,000,000 miles an hour and you have to know it and read the book and understand, and there's a quiz at the end, right? That's oftentimes too much, even for an organization that's full speed ahead and, in the going from the 8-figure realm to 9 figures, it's still just like there's a lot to be had from that, a system and some of the tools that in their simplest form can help a business at any stage, but it's oftentimes not all at once. And so knowing how to pace that is key to not overwhelm everybody or end up, burned and exhausted and burnt out.
Well, Jill, thank you so much for your time today. I just wanted to say that, I think that your expertise shines through. Obviously, you're very passionate about what you do. And so I just really appreciate you spending some time with me, unpacking this case study, telling a couple of cautionary tales, and really kind of, allowing us to see the expertise that you bring to the table when you're working with your clients. And so, I just really appreciate that. For those of the viewers that are joining, Jill's the founder and CEO of Savvy Strategic Partners. Savvy Strategic Partners is a full service fractional C-suite serving business owners with an experienced collective of outsourced executive leadership services across the functions of operations, revenue, and finance. Jill, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Matt. This was so fun. I appreciate it.